Welcome back. In this recording, I would like to show you how we're going to use the PM² Risk Log in order to introduce our risks, both positive and negative. I have introduced three tabs. The first tab includes the priority chart or heat map. The second tab is the threat register, where we're going to introduce the negative risks, the threats. And the third tab is the opportunities register, where we're going to introduce the positive risks, opportunities. Let's start with the first one. We have a heat map for negative risks, and we have a heat map for positive risks. Let's start with the negative risks. First, we need to define the colors. The colors represent the risk attitude of the organization. So the more the red colors, the more risk averse the organization would be, because that would mean that if there is a risk on the red zone, the organization will have to remove it in order to start the project. So the more the red blocks, the more the risks that the organization will have to remove prior to kickstarting the project. Now, the yellow zone represents we could say like the tolerance zone of the organization. Risks that fall within this particular zone do not hinder the project for starting, but for each of these risks, we will have to come up with a risk response strategy. The green zone represents the risks that are accepted by our organization. So we don't have to do anything about these risks. Now let's have a look at the opportunities priority chart or heat map. Here you see that within the red zone, I have risks with high likelihoods and high positive impact. So the risks that fall within the red zone, these are good risks. These are good opportunities that I will have to do my best to exploit them. So I will invest in exploiting them. And I will only start in a way my project if I am 100% sure that I will be able to profit from these opportunities. Now, the positive risks that fall within the yellow zone, these are good risks as well, with a relative high probability or very high probability and impact, positive impact. But for these risks, I'm going to devise positive risk response strategies, and I will try to take the benefits out of them. So that would mean I would invest in hiring, for example, good resources in order to increase the probability of success of the project. Hiring competent resources will not guarantee the success of the project, but will increase the possibility, will increase the likelihood of having a successful project. So here, you devise your risk response strategies in order to increase the probability of exploiting the positive outcome of the opportunity. Now, when it comes to the risks falling into the green zone, especially for the opportunities, you do nothing. It's like lottery. You're either going to win it or not. Now, how do you calibrate the zones? From these boxes here, you can calibrate the colors of the heat map. So if I place here, for example, 13, you will see that the red blocks assume the values higher than 13. And you can manipulate these numbers until you reach a color mode that represents your organization's risk attitude. And now a question that could come from your side would be like, how am I supposed to know which color fragmentation represents my organization's risk attitude? Let me show you how we calibrate the heat map. I will start with the threats. I have the heat map in colorblind mode. That means there are no colors over there. I have my participants in my workshop populate the heat map with the post-it notes. Each post-it note including the description of the risk, the likelihood of the risk, and the impact of the risk. So let's say we have here around 30 risks. And let's say that a risk falls here. I will take that post-it note and I will ask my organization, I will ask the participants in my workshop, guys, would you feel comfortable starting the project with that risk over there? If they say no, then this is a red block. If they say, well, you know something, yes, but I would like to take some precautionary measures and devise a risk response strategy just to have it handy, then this color would change to yellow. This way, I ask questions from post-it notes from numerous blocks, and I try to calibrate in a way my heat map. So it's not a random approach that I follow, it's a calibrated in a way approach. Now let's have a look at the opportunities heat map. How do we do the corresponding work on this side? So once again, a colorblind mode, no colors. We do our workshop, we identify our opportunities, and we put them on the heat map. And I start picking up post-it notes and I start asking the same question. So for example, if I take a post-it note from here where we have a high probability, high positive impact opportunity, I will ask my audience, guys, what do you think? Should we exploit this opportunity prior to starting the project? Or is it okay to start and let it be? If they say, guys, we should definitely exploit this opportunity, that means that this one becomes a red block. If they say, okay, we can pick up, we can start, and we will see how we're going to deal with it, then this one will change color and will become a yellow one. So same thing here, you adopt the numbers. Let's say we put 10. You adopt the numbers and you calibrate and you reflect the organizational risk attitude towards opportunities on the opportunities heat map. Now that we have this clear, now that we have the organizational risk attitude reflected both on the threats heat map and on the opportunities heat map, it's time to start populating our two registers. The register for the opportunity, for the threats, and the register for the opportunities. So let's have a look at the columns that we have. Risk ID. Every risk should have a unique identifier. Category. It's up to you to define the general category under which the risk falls. You're going to provide a title for the risk, a generic short title, and then you're going to provide the elaborated version where you're going to include the risk meta language, as we said, the cause, risk, effect. After you put the information in here, you will go and define the status from the drop-down list. We always place information on who has identified the risk and the day the risk was identified. Finally, you should always keep in mind that the risk is a risk as long as it has an impact on one of the project's objectives. If the impact does not affect the objectives, then this is not a risk. Here you can select from the drop-down list. We have the major objectives, cost, schedule, scope, quality, plus other. For example, here it could be security, safety, etc. Once you have this information populated in there, you have to go and introduce your impact score and your likelihood. Here we have scales from 1 to 5 in both cases. But let's go back for a second. You will have to calibrate your scales. Let's start with likelihood first. Over here, I have an extract from the PM² Risk Management Plan. You will identify a definition of what is very low, thus 1, low, 2, medium, 3, high, 4, and very high, 5. You have definitions. You can introduce various definitions per objective. So in a way, you could have similar likelihood scales for scope, time, and cost, but you could, let's say, for example, differentiate them for safety and security. In this way, we calibrate the heat map even further. We go beyond the color calibration. The same will apply on the impact scale as well. 1, very low, 2, low, 3, medium, 4, high, 5, very high. Over here, you can define scales per objective. So you can have a scale from 1 to 5 on objective, on the scope objective, then another one on the budget objective, and another one on the schedule objective, on the quality objective, etc. It's up to you to define it and calibrate it to your organization and to the needs of your project. Once you provide these definitions, then you can move forward and attribute a score. Let's say you put 2 on the impact score and 5 on the likelihood. The product will be automatically calculated, and it will take the respective color as well. This, for example, here you have yellow because 10 is within the yellow zone. Once you have this information introduced, you have to introduce the name of the risk owner and if there is a need to escalate this risk. So is it a risk that we can handle internally in the project, or should we escalate it at the program or portfolio level? Here you can have a simple drop-down list, yes or no. Now, let's have a look at the response strategy and the actual details, and then I will get you back on the trigger. When it comes to threats, we have these response strategies. Avoid, reduce, mitigate is a synonym to reduce, transfer, share, passive acceptance, or active acceptance. Once you define the generic category of the risk response, you go here and you provide detailed information on how you're going to implement this strategy for the identified risk. And then you will go back and you will populate the trigger. The trigger will be the event that will ring the bell and say, Elias, it's about time that you start implementing the identified risk response. Over here, we put the target date, the latest target date by which the response should be implemented. Finally, at the end, we place any traceability information or any other comments. The exact same approach applies for opportunities. You will have the exact same information, and the only difference will be the response strategy drop-down list. So here you have exploit, enhance, share, and accept. Everything else remains the same. Here we conclude with the presentation of the tool. Let me say something again. A tool is nothing but a tool, and the risk log is also a tool. So you know the famous acronym GIGO comes from the words garbage in, garbage out. So if you feed the log with garbage, the output that you're going to have will be garbage. And why am I saying that? The reason that I'm saying that is people are not machine. People sometimes think and act intuitively according to their experiences, according to the way that they're used to act. So we have to make sure that we check up on them. This allows me to transition to the second part of my presentation. So, this is your brain. And let me explain to you how your brain works. Your brain, according to Kahneman and Tversky, Kahneman is a Nobel laureate who has gained the Nobel Prize for prospect theory. He has said that our brain is split into two parts. System 1, which is the back part of our brain, and system 2, which is the front part. The back part is very fast. It takes fast and intuitive responses. The front part is damn slow, and it's being triggered by the back brain. So whenever the back brain feels that, oh, I cannot provide with an answer, it triggers the front brain. And the front brain is the one taking doing all the hard work to derive to a more accurate solution. According to Kahneman, decision-making is affected by many biases, but there are some principal ones, like the anchoring bias, the confirmation bias, the framing effect, and let's say the halo effect. So if you think with the back brain, it's more possible that these biases kick in. Let's start with the anchoring bias. The anchoring bias is when you have something in your mind and you base your proposal, you base your argumentation on what you have in your mind. Thus, you are anchored to what you have. Let me give you an example with you trying to buy a car, a used car. You go to the reseller and you see the car in the lot and there is a price tag on the windscreen. The owner sees you, he approaches you, and he kindly asks you, hello, sir, hello, madam, how can I help you? You come back and say, I would like to buy this car. What's the price? The guy says, oh, you can see the price. The price is written on the windscreen. It's, let's say, 20,000 euro. And you go back and say, 20,000 euro. Ooh, this is extremely expensive. Could you give me a better price? I mean, like, can you chop it down a bit from the 20,000 euros? And the guy says, oh, you know something? I can give you like a 2% discount from 20,000 euro. Can you do anything better? So in this engagement, in this interaction, you fell for the anchoring bias. And the anchoring bias was imposed by the seller in our case, because he anchored your mind on the price tag that he had on the windscreen of the car. The solution to avoid anchoring bias is historical information. So the proper approach from the buyer side would have been to go and do some research on the selling of similar vehicles from the same year with a similar situation, get an average, go back to the seller, and when the seller says, I can give you a 2% discount from what you see on the windscreen, you will go back and say, no, you will give me a 2% discount from the average price that I found in the market. This way, you don't fall for the anchoring bias. When it comes to risk analysis, this could take place in the case where you attribute a probability, attribute an impact based on your personal prior experience and what you have experienced in the past, and not based on the general information provided from other similar projects within the organization or within other organizations. So you can look within the organization, what was the average probability, the average likelihood of something similar taking place. You take that one, and this is what you introduce in your heat map. Confirmation bias, well, this is pretty much self-explanatory. You provide the information that you already have in your mind in order to make sure that what you say is fulfilled. The solution, once again, is historical information and try to relate the decision that you want to take right now with what the historical information provides. The framing effect represents a bias that it's imposed on you in a way. So you are the receptor of information from your environment, and that information influences you towards a specific direction. Solution to this case, to this bias as well, historical information. Halo effects. Okay, I will go and ask Nick to provide me with his estimation on the likelihood of this event. Nick says 80%. And just because I trust Nick, I say, okay, given Nick gave me the information is correct. So I put a hello on the head of Nick and I trust him, and I don't do a cross-examination of the information that I received. Once again, the solution is historical information. So a takeaway from here, if the organization does not have a knowledge management system, a repository where they store all the lessons learned and all the information, all the logs and all the documentation from previous projects, so that future project managers can take them, analyze them, and have justified estimations, then nothing works. Allow me to prove to you that you're biased. And we will do that using an example from, you can find it in the book of Kahneman and Trevsky, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's based on the research that they have done on the influence of bias on decision making. They have various similar tests in there, but I have deliberately chosen this one. I will ask a question, and you will have 10 seconds to provide me with your answer. I will be counting. When I reach 10, I want you to put down your pencils and read to yourselves the answer that you have written on the slip of paper. But please do write one. No matter what that is, just put it down. So here comes the question. A baseball and the bat cost $1.10 together. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? You have 10 seconds to find the answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Put down your pencils. Now, in most cases, I have done this experiment in numerous classes. 15 to 18 people out of 20 reply 0.10. And this is the intuitive reply that comes from your mind because you feel stressed, you don't have the time to do the math behind it, and you write down what appears to be the most easy answer. This is called as the bait and switch trap. So you fall for the easy solution. Now, if I would give you 10 minutes to do the math, you would see that the correct answer is 0.05. I will not do the math for you, but I will have you do it. Once we finish off with the presentation, just do the math and have a look. Through this exercise, I want to demonstrate to you how the back of our brain works and how the front of our brain works. When you don't have the time to react, you force the back of your brain to take the decision. The back of your brain provides a fast decision, but it's not always correct. When you have the time, the back of your brain triggers the front part saying, hey, front part, I cannot figure it out. Can you do the math for me, please? And you do the math properly. And you realize that the solution initially provided by the back of your brain was wrong. So, learning outcome. challenge what you will find in the risk log by your workshop participants. When they come and they say, I have estimated a likelihood of 60%, challenge them. Why is it 60% and not 40%? Where did you base your estimation? If you do not challenge them, most probably you're introducing more risks in your risk log than you can actually tackle. This is the book from Daniel Kahneman. I highly recommend that you read it, and you're gonna demystify the way your brain works. And this is to help you crack a smile. Learning outcome. Always challenge yourselves. Always challenge the estimates of your risk team. This is the only way to make sure that you have trustworthy information, and thus you can take well-justified decisions. This is where I conclude with this presentation. Thank you very much.